Genesis 39 opens back up with the story of Joseph. We're kind of going back to him after we spent time in chapter 38 looking at a story of Judah. But I think it's important to remember this, that Joseph's story is interrupted by a story of one of his older brothers. And thus, we will come back to Judah and what happens in his life. But in chapter 37, we saw that Joseph descended into a well. And now in chapter 39, he's descending further now into Egypt as he goes to Potiphar's house in chains. While there, though, he's kind of lifted up. He ends up becoming second in command of Potiphar's house, although he's still a slave. And unfortunately, the story kind of turns on its head. We see that Joseph is being pursued, sexually harassed by Potiphar's wife. She kind of carries out the steps of evil. Joseph is described as someone that's well-built, someone that's attractive, someone that people want to look at. And so she does look at him, even eventually grabbing his tunic and ripping it off as he runs away, fleeing. Every single time she pursued him, wanting to have sex with him, Joseph would say no. The text in Genesis 39, verse 10 says this, "Even though she continued to speak to Joseph day after day, he did not respond to her invitation to go to bed with her." And what's fascinating is that you realize there's two primary reasons why he says no. First reason he says no is because this would disgrace his master's household. Joseph is caring about someone else's family. The second reason that Joseph says no is because this would be a sin against God, as it says in verse 9. Joseph's character shows through here as he is tempted day after day and says no day after day. But unfortunately, although he is maintaining his character, he will end up being falsely accused. Potiphar's wife is going to end up lying, saying that Joseph was the one that pursued her. And it ends up poorly for Joseph, as it says, going down to verse 19. "When his master heard his wife say, 'This is the way your slave treated me,' his master was furious. Joseph's master took him and threw him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. So he was there in the prison." Falsely accused, even though he had been following God and being faithful to his master's household. This is an interesting contrast whenever we compare it to Judah in chapter 38. In chapter 38, it's a pretty devastating story. Judah loses his son, who's married to a lady named Tamar. And after losing his son, he pretty much makes Tamar go away, even though in that culture he's supposed to be taking care of her. She is so devastated by this, trying to get his attention. She ends up disguising herself as a prostitute. Whenever he goes looking for a prostitute, he sees her and they end up having sex. Terrible story. He ends up finding out sometime later that Tamar is all of a sudden pregnant. And so much so that he's so angry that he wants to have her killed. He just says, "Let's stone her, let's burn her." And of course, she's able to tell him, "You are the one. You are the father." And in that moment, he feels guilty. He confesses his sin. Comparing these two brothers is fascinating. And I think that's the reason why chapter 38 comes before, of course, chapter 39. Judah goes looking for lust, while Joseph says no to lust day after day after day. Judah does not take care of his own family, while Joseph takes care of someone else's family. Judah is accused, rightfully so, while Joseph is falsely accused. We see that Joseph's character is holding up here. And the reason why is because he is dedicated to the Lord. Not just to his master's household, but because it would be a sin against God. I want to pay attention, though, to how this episode ends. Because we can look at this moment and see, look at this other moment of injustice where the good person ends up getting the bad end of the stick. But look at verse 21. I think it's telling to us about how we're supposed to be feeling in this moment. The text says, But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him kindness. He granted him favor in the sight of the prison guard. He granted him grace, can be how that word is translated there. Grace in the sight of the prison warden. As Christians, or as people just trying to pursue God or curious about God, we will be faced with temptations. And yet what we see in this story is that we can say no to it. I really want to highlight that I think Joseph understood the idea of grace. Grace is both soft and hard. It is soft in the sense of that it can and it will accept the most addicted of sinners. And yet God's grace is strong. It's hard. It is powerful enough to break the chains of our addictions. We are all addicted to something. We all have the sins that we so easily want to go back to. But what this story shows is that God's promises are stronger than what sin offers us. Do you believe this? Jesus did. Jesus was tempted all throughout his life, even whenever he was fasting for 40 days and 40 nights, and the serpent came talking to him. And yet every single time, Jesus said no. He was tempted in every way, like us, and yet did not sin, is what the author of the book of Hebrews says. And sometimes we can look at Joseph or we can look at Jesus and say, okay, they did it, but I can't. But the beauty of the resurrection, the beauty for those who are indwelled by the Spirit of Christ, is that when the serpent comes talking to us, when sin comes and starts tempting us, we have the same Spirit that resurrected Jesus from the grave living in us. And so in the same way that Jesus says no to those temptations, we can too. I'm not saying that the temptations will go away. No, they're going to come day after day, as the text says. But what I've experienced in my own life, friends, is that the more we say no to it, although it might still be persistent, the volume slowly turns down on it, and God's voice ends up being turned up. And so I don't know what your sin is, but I want this story to remind you of God's grace. God's grace is soft. I don't know what you've done. I don't know what you did before watching this, but I want you to know that God's grace welcomes you in. But God's grace is also strong and is powerful enough to set you free from the chains that you have allowed to be put upon yourself. Sin is powerful. Sin is enticing, but the Spirit of God is truly stronger.